quorum being present, the ISA amendment was pending when we recessed for the 9/11 ceremony on the Capitol steps. It's my understanding, who seeks recognition?
Madam Chairwoman, I seek recognition. This is Massie from Kentucky.
And Mr. Massie, you are recognized to strike the last word, and you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just wanted to weigh in on the ISA amendment. The ISA amendment would require vaccinations for immigrants coming into this country, the COVID vaccination. And it's got exceptions for moral and religious objections. And Madam Chairwoman, you yourself did say that there's already guidelines or legislation or something in place that would institute this without the amendment. But you mentioned that there were exemptions for moral and religious reasons, and I was able to look into that, and there are exemptions. So here is my question, somewhat rhetorical. We have exemptions in the statutes for members of the military for either medical or religious reasons. Yet I've spoken with dozens of members of the military, and none of them have been allowed an exemption. They have applied. Their applications were received favorably within their immediate chain of command, but as they go up to the top, there's almost a blanket prohibition. In fact, I'm going to say right now, there is a blanket prohibition on religious and medical exemptions, and nobody in the military can get one. So why would we give more, be more charitable to immigrants into this country than we are to our own U.S. members of the military? I just think it's disrespectful of the military not to honor these exceptions that they seek while we turn around and offer these exceptions to immigrants. There were more people who died of suicide, more members of the active duty military and veterans yesterday died of suicide than there were in an entire year die of COVID in the military. Yet we are putting our members of the military in an incredibly difficult position. We are telling them if they don't take the vaccine, and this is the case with enlisted members of the military, if they don't take the vaccine, they face court-martial, which is practically a felony, and they would be lumped in with rapists and murderers for simply refusing to take a vaccine, which many of them do not need. They've already had a prior infection, which has conferred upon them immunity. And there's no evidence that says that they would benefit from the dosage of the vaccine if they already have prior immunity, more so than the risk that there is to them, particularly the risk to males who are between ages of 19 and 24 of myocarditis. So I just think it's wrong that we're putting our members of the military in this situation. Some of them have been in 18, 19 years. They are resigning. They have resigned. Some of them have been sidelined for their refusal to take the novel vaccine because they don't need it. And it's been bad for morale. It's going to be bad for recruitment. It's going to be bad for retention. It's already bad for all of those things. And I'm worried that we're giving more leeway to these immigrants than we are to our own members of the military. And if I may touch on one other thing that's been mentioned in this hearing, 250 years ago, there was this, they discovered how to inoculate people to smallpox by giving them a small infection of smallpox. Well, you know what? 250 years ago, they recognized immunity from prior infection. In fact, that is what the smallpox vaccine was. George Washington himself was subject to smallpox as a teenager. I can't find that he decided to vaccinate himself. They knew about prior immunity conferred by a prior infection 250 years ago, but we've gone backwards. We've gone more than 250 years backwards because we don't recognize immunity that's conferred from an infection. So that's all that I wanted to say on this amendment. I do not support vaccine mandates. I cannot support the amendment itself. but I think it's hypocritical and disrespectful to tell members of the military that they will not be granted any exemption for any reason. We've got it written and codified into this amendment and into the rules that are being promulgated by CDC and DHS for immigrants. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Who else seeks recognition on this amendment? Mr. Roy? Is that Mr. Roy?
Yes, ma'am. I do seek recognition.
You're recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair. I'd like to associate myself with the remarks of my friend, Mr. Massie from Kentucky. Look, I very much appreciate the sentiment of what is driving Mr. Issa, my friend's amendment. People in Texas are absolutely beside themselves that we have wide open borders, that we had the press secretary to the President of the United States just the other day acknowledge that, yeah, we're going to have a big executive order mandating that the American people have to run around showing their vaccine status in order to do X, Y, or Z. But then, no mandate on what we're dealing with those at the border. Importantly, that there are many people coming across the border who are COVID positive, and you're not going to do a darn thing about it. That's the truth. In fact, the White House press secretary basically said so at a press conference. The American people literally are beside themselves. So I actually understand very much the sentiment behind what my friend from California, Mr. Ice, is trying to do with this amendment. I disagree with the amendment and won't support it. And here's why. I do not believe that we should be admitting these individuals to the United States. We should not. This is what Title 42 in our health codes does. This is what the President of the United States prior, President Trump, did, which was use Title 42 combined with a return to Mexico policy, which, by the way, a federal judge just ordered this administration to go back to enforcing. If you combine those two things, we can have sanity at our border. We could stop having wide open borders where fentanyl is coming into our nation and destroying our youth and killing Americans. We could stop having people coming into our state of Texas and our nation who are COVID positive and having NGOs fill a hotel, fill a hotel with people they know to be positive with COVID. These are all things happening at the border. When I was at the border just last week, in Laredo, when I was visiting with ranchers in Uvalde, when I was visiting with ranchers in Roma, and their fences are getting cut, and they're finding dead bodies of immigrants all over South Texas. 89 dead bodies in Brooks County, 70-something dead bodies in the Del Rio sector, several hundred across the entire border of Texas. Had one rancher who found a skull that had been picked apart of a migrant, a dead mom of twins, she's pregnant with twins, dead in South Texas, while my Democrat colleagues do nothing about it. And now, with wide open borders, you're just totally fine with people being COVID positive. We should enforce Title 42. We should secure the border of the United States. We should stop playing games with $107 billion bills, the money that we don't have. We should stop having the President of the United States issuing unconstitutional, unlawful mandates that I have no intention of following. Will tell every Texan I know not to follow. And with all due respect, we shouldn't offer an amendment here that is basically saying, oh, yeah, go ahead and admit them and then force us to then provide vaccines to immigrants. I don't believe we ought to be jamming people with a vaccine against their wishes, whether they're a migrant or an American. We should just secure the border. And then we should stop the crisis that way instead of giving in to this Overton window shifting by Democrats who don't give a damn about securing our border. I yield back.
Would the gentleman yield to Daryl Issa?
Is that Mr. Issa? Yes, sir.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I just want to point out something and ask it to be placed in the record. The list of vaccines required by those who wish to enter the United States to immigrate include Hep A, Hep B, influenza, rubella, mumps, measles, polio, tetanus, diphtheria, and 6 more. And I only do so because those are the vaccines that people willingly agree to have in order to immigrate to the United States.
If the gentleman would yield back, if I reclaim my time, I would just say, look, I agree with you. And under lawful immigration, we should do that. But what we should do is enforce Title 42 and stop allowing people to come in under the false name of asylum when we know it's not asylum.
We agree.
Lack of willingness by this administration to secure the border of the United States. So we should enforce Title 42. And then for legal immigrants, absolutely deal with whatever vaccines that we think is appropriate. I yield to the gentleman from Kentucky if I have any time left. Mr.
Thank
Massie.
you. This will just be brief. I found on the CDC website that they recommend ivermectin for refugees from several continents into the United States. This is the CDC recommending it. Of course, it's not for COVID, it's for nematodes, but I hope we can put to rest the notion that this drug is only for animals. Thank you. And I yield back to
The gentleman's time has expired. Do additional
Thank you.
gentleman's time has expired. Who else wishes to be recognized on this amendment?
Madam Chair.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Madam Chair, the mixed message reflected by the administration is amazing, and this amendment does its best to try to clarify a bit of that. And I raised this issue not because I oppose the vaccine. In fact, my mom passed away from complications from polio. So, as we've heard, anyone who's been exposed to that horrid disease understands the value of vaccine. But the frustration and anger and outrage that I've been hearing from folks across my district, firemen, EMTs, nurses, truck drivers, hairdressers, farmers, ranchers, electrical workers, and many others about being told what they have to do is just amazing, and it's really sad because it's distracting from the message that should be coming from healthcare workers and others who actually know about vaccines and can explain the value of them. But this double standard that's being provided to those who are entering our country illegally is doing the same thing I think that the Biden administration is doing when it says you're going to have to get vaccinated, but don't expect things to be any different after you do. You still have to wear masks. And so this double message, this confusion at this level is just amazing. And I'm not sure yet whether I'll support this amendment, but it certainly does raise the confusion that is being generated, I think, by the Biden administration. With that, I yield back. I yield. Yes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. He mentioned double standard. That's all we've got from this administration relative to COVID is a double standard and a mixed message. I mean, double standard. I remember the governor of California going to a dinner with lobbyists and friends and family, no mask. At the same time, he was telling the folks he represents in his state that they couldn't have Thanksgiving with their family. I mean, talk about mixed message. But Dr. Fauci said no mask, then one mask, then two masks, then one mask, then no mask, now back to one mask. I mean, they've been all over the place. Yesterday, the Vice President Harris, let me just find it. Vice President Harris tweeted out this. Vice President Harris said, by vaccinating, increasing our testing and masking, and protecting the vaccinated, we can end this pandemic, which sort of raises an obvious question. If the vaccine protects, why do the vaccinated need protecting? I think it's pretty basic question. So they've been all over the place on mixed messages. I think the gentleman's amendment from the gentleman from California, his amendment is simply like, look, if you're going to mandate it for American citizens, and if they don't get it, they may lose their job, doesn't it make sense for people who are coming into this country, particularly coming here illegally, that they should have to get it? Pretty common sense. I bet the folks I represent in the 4th District of Ohio would say, yeah, that makes kind of common sense to me. That's all this amendment says. But no, the Democrats say, no, we're going to mandate it for American citizens, but we're not going to mandate it for people who come to the country illegally. That makes no sense. There's not a person I represent, I would bet, in the 4th District of Ohio who would agree with their position. But that's their position. And there's not anyone in the whole country who understands what the vice president is saying yesterday in this tweet. By vaccinating, increasing our testing and masking, and protecting the vaccinated, we can end this pandemic. What? I don't get it. If the vaccine protects, why do the vaccinated need protecting? I don't get it. I do not get it. But again, that's the one thing consistent from the Biden administration relative to COVID is their inconsistency. That's the one thing we know. With that, I yield back to the gentleman from Oregon.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to build on what we just heard a bit, and not just from ranking member, but it's been asserted that the many vaccines have been mandated, and thus we should accept this one. But having served on school boards before, I know how those mandates emerge. They emerge locally and with local folks saying, after much angry debate, a tough decision is made locally. That's not what's happening here. This decision is being made at the very highest level, and an expansion of federal government control like I've never seen. And so to suggest that somehow what the Biden administration is doing is the equivalent of local school board is ridiculous. With that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who else seeks recognition?
Gomert.
Oh, Mr. Gomer, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate so much the comments that have been made about this issue. And it is absolutely startling to think that an administration could be basically creating this attractive nuisance, is what it's called in tort law, where we're drawing people in who end up, many women being raped. Some Doctors Without Borders had said 25%. I've been down there. I've seen the tree with undergarments from those that have been raped. We hear all this care and concern, yet I've also been down there and seen busload after busload after busload of people who are coming in illegally, and they're being shipped by this administration all over the country. And so when my friend from Ohio talks about hypocrisy, this is at a deadly, fatal level, because we know people die from COVID. And yet they're basically welcoming them. They're drawing them in greater numbers than ever in history. And we're going to have apparently a couple of million. And I've seen estimates or heard estimates from doctors doing screening anywhere from 6% to 20% of the people they've screened have COVID that have come in illegally. And this administration, without requiring any vaccination, yeah, they're luring them in and then shipping them all over the country to states, to territories, to towns that have no say whatsoever in whether they accept them, whether they have COVID, whether they've been inoculated. This administration does not care. And they're shipping them around. I mean, my gosh, I appreciate so much Mr. Ice's amendment, and I know he does not welcome people that are coming in illegally in droves. We've got to get some sanity back to that. But he tries to add a little element of sanity. If you're going to basically throw open the floodgates, for heaven's sake, you have said inoculations are important, this administration. And so either you don't believe that and you're lying to us, or you have some motive for luring this many people in, not inoculating them, and sending them with COVID all over the country. It is really getting into a treasonous area here. It really is. Now, as far as the exceptions, my friends and colleagues have brought up, I mean, I've gotten all over East Texas. I am today. And a friend in Carthage, Texas, had a husband. He was at risk for blood clots, but got the vaccination. He knows this administration has been pushing it. People like Fauci, who say it's not smart to go to a ball game and not wear a mask, as he sat there at a Washington National Games, didn't socially distance without a mask. So we're listening to a guy who is self-admittedly stupid, Fauci. And yet they're not doing what could be done. We've, at least with American citizens, ought to give them the chance to talk to their doctor. Because as my friend from Carthage said, if my husband had not listened to the federal government, if he had not gotten the vaccination, he would be with me today. He got the vaccination. Whether we want to talk about it or not, there are thousands and thousands of people that have died from getting the vaccination. That's why it's so important for the military, especially, but for all American citizens, and to have a choice, to get back to that great doctrine of informed consent, and not have some, maybe he's there, maybe he's not there, president order a blanket order. Let's, for heaven's sake, at least require those coming in illegally to get vaccinated. And I yield back as my time's expired.
Gentleman's time has expired. Do others wish to be heard on this amendment? Ms. Jackson-Lee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me put on the record, first of all, Dr. Fauci is not stupid. I think that is certainly an inappropriate commentary. But let me just briefly indicate that the horrors on the border and the facts that my friends are articulating are not completely accurate as relates to vaccination of those. There is a process. There is a process of their entry. There's a process of their processing. It is in place. This budget reconciliation bill is not dealing with policy as much as it's dealing with funding to ensure that we can do a better job of addressing those human beings who are seeking opportunities or asylum in the only way that they may know. I think factually it is important to take note of our military and thank them for their bravery and courage. And they will tell you that upon their entrance into the United States military, they're giving a battery of vaccines. And most of that is taken willingly under medical supervision. The idea is to ensure their safety, to provide them with all of the tools needed to wear the uniform. And I think we should take note of that. It is not to do harm. It is not to do harm as it relates to the President of the United States. He is not intending to do harm. If you take a ride through a number of states, including Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, Georgia, and others, you will find numbers of individuals who've lost their life because beds are filled with unvaccinated persons in the ICU. That is a fact. My last point that I want to make, and it is an emotional point for me, because I do believe that unity and adherence to the idea is that we're in this fight as Americans together. We're not here to punish any group, vaccinated or unvaccinated. We're not here to punish any state, but we're in this together. My colleague from Texas just a few moments ago challenged everyone in the state of Texas, small businesses, government entities, to stand up and reject the actions called for by the President of the United States. He called upon them to rise up against their federal government. What does that get us? It gets us the insurrection of January 6th. If that's what he's calling for, I stand against it, really demand him to clarify his words, because he is encouraging and provoking actions that do not bespeak the unity of this nation and the flag that we serve under. And so I would hope that we would get to the business of bring back and building back better, act, and working on the issues before us. But I am shamed that this call for close to near provocation, but yet nothing has been said about the Saudi bill, the bill that is soiled of attacks on women. by stalking them, getting a bounty of $10,000. I've heard nothing from my friends on the other side of the aisle, but they're so concerned about who is getting a vaccine or not. I would be concerned about getting vaccinated by all of the American people, but I'm concerned about the attack on women in the state of Texas, such that they have to run away from stalkers who are seeking a bounty on their bodies. Not a word from my friends. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by Mr. Issa. All those in favor of the amendment will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those who oppose the amendment will signify by saying no. No.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. And the noes have it. And are there additional amendments to be heard? Mr. Stubbe apparently has an amendment. Clerk
Yes, thank
will,
you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
okay, the clerk will report the amendment.